Everyone ready?
No, you can go ahead. I'll be on in a minute.
Welcome, everyone. We will go ahead and call the work session to order, and I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Cox, and we'll begin.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll go ahead and begin with the work session. First of all is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions concerning that? I would just say that it does include a list of donations that have been offered in light of the COVID crisis and then the Aruba Hewlett-Packard donation. This is simply the board acknowledging those donations. So if not, then under communications to the board, under director's report, during the meeting, we'll be hearing a feeding program report from Amber Anderson. She'll give us a summary at the 6:30 meeting concerning the conclusion of the emergency feeding and then an update on the summer feeding program. And then we will do the class of 2020 report. It's something that I would like for us to make a tradition where we celebrate the accomplishments of our graduating class. And here's some important statistics regarding the amount of scholarship awards. It's cumulative, and so we look forward to that. And then Mr. Flannery is not able to be with us tonight, so we'll postpone the cosmetology discussion. So with that, we're to your comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As you know, next month we'll have the 4th of July during the week of our meeting. So we're entertaining the notion of meeting on July the 9th. And so everyone take a look at your calendars and see if 4 and 6:30 would work. And we're going to be virtual again in July for sure, probably August too.
What was that date again?
July the 9th. Everyone okay with that?
I believe so. My schedule is so bizarre now. I'm not positive, but
Do we have Mr. Robinson on the? I don't see him. Is he on?
yes, he's on.
Okay. There you are. Okay, then we'll consider that our date if everyone's had time to consider it. And Dr. Cox, that's all I have.
Okay. So under unfinished business,
Beginning going down the order here, the Bluff City Middle School is that sale is complete. We have our money, and Mr. Laser has his property, and so all of that is behind us, with the exception of the one small lot that had been part of the school grounds, and we are working on taking care of that. I reached out to his attorney this week, and so we're hopefully we're going to make good progress on that and tie up that last loose end. On the Holston Ball Field property, the bids were received on May 27th. The high bid was by Keith Kate, and that was $51,000. And I'll be asking you to approve that sale of that property for that amount. On the old Holston Institute, I guess we're still kind of trying to get ourselves squared away on it. So it's pretty much where it was, and I can maybe tell you some more about that later. But it's obviously moving slower because of all of the obstacles that are there, but it certainly hasn't been forgotten. And Holston Valley has been turned over to the purchasing office for sale of that property to take bids. I don't believe it hasn't been set yet, but I've turned the paperwork in on it, so it should be coming up before too long. And so we've gotten 2 of our 4 basically done. The Holston Ball Field property is just a matter of wrapping up the paperwork, and the others are moving along in progress.
I do have one question on that.
Doesn't matter. Curious about the Holston Ballfield property. I was told that we had several bids on it and that 2 were very close in price. Can we get a little bit more information about that?
I can give you exactly.
I can't hear.
Right there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matthews.
And I can run down those for everybody else.
Wow, I mean that's really close. Is that something, if they're that close, that we should do a second phase of something? Because I mean, they're within just a few $100s on one, and they're like 10% of another one. So I'm just kind of curious if that's not something we should. I don't know the process. Is that something we should look at?
I can't hear anything except for what Mark's saying.
Matthew's talking. I can't.
I haven't heard a word of anything Pat.
He's not hearing a word. Are you muted, Pat?
I heard you, Mark.
My bad. Okay. So I'm thinking our public notice said we were going to sell it to the highest bidder, and we gave a date that you had to have your bids in. So in my mind, we've obligated ourselves to go ahead with that sale, unless, I mean, sometimes in those bidding situations, there's other reasons to decline to go forward, but I'm unaware of any here. And I guess someone might find a legal theory by which we could do that, but it seems like that would sort of be might be dirty pool a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, that was my question, because I just didn't know. But I mean, if one is $51,000, one's $50,005, one's $46,000, it just seems like if there's that much interest, that a real bidding system would have been an auction style thing.
Well,
I don't know if that's something too far along, and that's hindsight, I'm sure.
Well, and that's a good point, and I guess people who know more about it than I do could debate whether you get more in a one bid auction thing like this, or whether if you had a auctioneer out there, you might get more. But in my experience, these things have worked out better for us financially than the go to the property and have an auctioneer. So I'm not sure why we've sort of gone to this, and that's what Ms. Davis has recommended for us. So in my mind, we're doing well. In the past, some of these things have not gone very well.
Well, that's, like I say, I was just not sure about process, but when I saw that many that close, or I heard, I hadn't actually seen them that many that close, it just seemed like, thank you.
Well, good question, and that's you got the sum of my knowledge there, I think.
Normally, when you have a sealed bid, that's the purpose of a sealed bid. You take the highest bid, and if you go back and do something otherwise, I think it would cause us to question the integrity of the process. But even beyond that, if you go to a public auction, then you're looking at least a 10%, if not more, I believe, as far as auctioneer's fee when it comes to doing that, plus all the advertising that would go with it. So the sealed bids seem to work. I mean, it's nice to know that there's a lot of people interested in these, but when you do a sealed bid, you've got to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward, and that's what happened.
Well, thank you. Like I say, I wasn't sure of the process. I'd never seen that before, and with them being that close, I just had to ask.
Well, I guess one thing you might say is that it would appear as though it came pretty close to getting the value of the property. You know, 3 different people who put pretty close to the same value on it, so that ought to make us feel good, I think.
I guess I must have misunderstood. I was thinking when we put these out, it was going to be where we didn't have to take the highest bid. We got to listen to these people and see what their plan was with the property. So now it's changed and we are just taking the highest bid.
Mr. Robinson, I really didn't hear you, but I think what you said was that it was your understanding we didn't have to take the highest bid, but that there's now been a decision that we are going to do that. Am I understanding you right?
Yes.
I guess since it's a work session, my question would be what, Mr. Robinson and Mr. Ireson, what would your suggestion be? I don't necessarily disagree with you, Mr. Robinson, that we always said we didn't have to accept any bid. But other than the fact people were close, what's the issue with taking the highest bidder?
Oh, I had no issue other than the fact of if there was that much interest, is that something we need to pursue? And I mean, just to see if the next person would say, oh, well, 51, 52, like an auction style. But just out of curiosity, I had no idea what the process was.
I mean, I understand. It's a valid. You can't hear me? I said I understand. I think it's a valid point you're making. It's just if you're going to do sealed bids and make choices based on that, if you try to set people into a bidding war, that is a little bit of a bait and switch type approach to. But I think it's a valid question. I just didn't know if there was some other concern that I was unaware of about any of these bidders, like because Mr. Robinson mentioned what they're going to do with the property. I didn't know if that was somebody's concern, because I would rather hear about it now than in 2 hours hear something that wasn't said at this work session. You're still mute.
I had no just curious about the price. I had no other issue.
Okay.
In response to Mr. Robinson, I was just going to say we don't have to accept any of the bids or necessarily the highest one if there's some independent reason for not accepting it. An illustration of that, I guess, is in a different context, but if we were putting a work project out for bids somebody might bid on it and be the best bid, but we might conclude they weren't able to do the work or they were disreputable. We wouldn't necessarily have to accept it. But here, these are, like I say, all these are close. So that would indicate to me that's pretty close to the value of the property. And if the highest bid had been $1,500, then we decline. But in this situation, I'm inclined to think we just ought to do that.
Well, and I agree, and I understand again what Paul's saying too, and I just go ahead and take it because the Bluff City Middle, since that property is completely done, if someone had came in and offered more, I love the presentation so much on the Bluff City property. I would have probably said I would rather take less and have something for the community. So I understand what Paul's saying too with that, and I agree with him. I mean, I don't know if anybody presented anything. I just know the bids. So.
And I guess that was kind of my understanding of what we was doing. We was going to find out what each person was wanting to do with the property. To me, I mean, I would rather see less for it if we know the community is going to use it. You get these kids somewhere to play ball or somewhere to hang out in the evenings that's safe, and we know what they're doing. That was just my ideal. And I'm guessing the ones that we got, we have no idea what their plan is with the property.
Well, I can tell you this gentleman's plan for the property. He lives next door to it, so he is wanting to use it for, I don't exactly want to say farmland, but he just wanted to get it to protect his property, and he has said, just maintain it basically as is. But I don't think he's going to convert it to a community use, and I don't think anybody else was. I know one of the bidders was going to use it for an industrial application. So that's a good point. And I guess we could ask in the future. Maybe we could inquire about that. We can at least talk about that down the road.
And they had time to come make a presentation like Chris, if somebody was going to do that. And I agree with what you and Paul both are saying. If somebody had to come with a presentation that they were going to use it for the kids in the community, I'd lend myself to that.
And I mean, and nothing says that they might come tonight. I mean, we don't know. I mean, I guess can they make comments tonight? Not all.
I'm not sure what's going on with the microphones, but or if I'm the only one that's getting cut out, but I'm not hearing what people are saying.
Go, Matthew.
I was just saying I didn't hear a word of the last minute of talking. I'm not sure why. It shows, I mean, I'm not muting anybody, but you all are cutting in and out. See, I can't hear Mark right now.
Oh, I just said I might have been too close. I'm not sure.
Okay.
You didn't miss anything from me. I was just making an off-the-cuff comment.
You said, though, that we could put that in the next bid together.
Yeah, I did say, that might be something we might want to consider in the future.
Right. Yeah, I caught that. I just didn't hear anything after that.
I was just making that off-the-cuff comment there.
What were your comments, Matthew? We missed something there.
Oh, all I was saying is I'm having a whole lot of difficulty hearing because the people that are all in the room together, one's mic will cut off and then your buzz cut off. So I don't know if Mr. Robinson's had that same issue, but we're only getting snippets of what y'all are saying.
Here's what we have to do on this end. When somebody in this room's talking, I have to mute mine. So sometimes when we're slow, like I've got to see one of you guys unmute. So we're a little, and I don't know if there's a lag time either from,
I wonder if Miss
I think, Mr. Spivey, we're going to put them in different rooms.
My mom tried that for years.
It's good practice for how we're supposed to use the microphone system in the boardroom.
we're going to try something different here. We're going to let Karen try to hook up, and we're going to try something different.
a little bit less echo. Do you need this extension cord, Karen? I don't need it anymore. You want me to bring
I
it?
would love it.
I'll bring it over.
I'll just hand it to you this way. I can go ahead and start right now. Plug into his.
I'm gonna plug it over behind you because it's hard for you guys. I'm 100%. You can. So I'm good.
Okay, sound check.
You may have to do like you do in the board.
The problem is I can't see immediately who's speaking. Sometimes I can tell that you're unmuted. That's the only way I can tell. Let's try it again. And if you're going to speak, give us a second or so to kind of recognize you and time for me to turn my volume off mute. Let's try that.
Okay, we will continue with the agenda, having concluded the discussion under unfinished business on the sale of properties. We move next to items of new business, and under that we have, first of all, approval of tenure. That it is required of the board to approve the tenure list that's been prepared by Mr. Smith. So we have that for the board's consideration later this evening. Under 6B, we have I'm recommending the suspension of policies 5.303 and 5.310 through the end of June 30, 2021. And the reason for that, these policies have to do with the accumulation of personal and vacation leave of employees who normally what happens is that you get to a point with a number of days where you use or lose, and because of the COVID pandemic, we have employees who are in a position they didn't have an opportunity to use those days. So what I'm asking the board to do, rather than change the policy, is just to suspend those portions of policies through June 30 of 2021, so that employees would not lose those days. Okay.
Just want to verify one thing, and I think I heard it what you said, and it's just questions have been coming to me. People will still earn the time.
They do.
They just won't lose the time. So it's not there's no max. Okay, fantastic.
No.
Okay, great.
No, that's right. Okay. Mr. Smith, would you want to comment any further?
Yes, I'll be glad to. We had some that had applied for tenure this year, but did not receive the process going through because they were short of time. The requirement is 45 months. Some people have 40 months. And so I did reach out to those people and told them we keep their application on file. Once the experience comes through for next year, they would be eligible to apply for tenure there. What we are also hearing too is that the 1819 LOE scores, which is one of the components that affect whether a teacher can receive tenure, those 1819 scores will be carried into the 1920 score. So anyone that was eligible for coming up next year, that LOE score will still apply for that. So that should help them out.
Mr. Smith, do you have any further comment on the suspension of those policies pertaining to employees not losing either personal or vacation days?
No, that's it. We just want to make sure that was being done just because it was not something they were able to control.
So like Mark said, that's more to protect them so they're not use it or lose it, right?
That's correct.
That's right. And we looked at different options. One option was to just change the policy, but in the same way that the state board had recommended that we just suspend policies pertaining to the emergency, we just thought that was a cleaner way. And so this suspension of policies then would expire at the end of June of next year. And that gives people time to appropriately use their days. We just didn't want any employee to lose earned time through no fault of their own.
Before we move on, can we have a short discussion about the tenure process?
Sure.
We've had a few miscommunications and hiccups the last couple of years, and I would like to request that going forward, that everyone on the board get the final version of the tenure list at least a month ahead, and so that everyone has a chance to review it. And if we're going to have a list that's a rough draft or something that's not the final version, make sure everyone knows that. And most importantly, sometime between now and next year, I think we all need, and maybe every year, an education on what the rules are, what the law is, a refresher course maybe that maybe you could provide, or I found out some things this time that I think everyone should know, and things like once your name's on a list, the teacher can't take it off. We can't take it off. It's on the list. So if we put it on the list, it's coming to us for a vote, no matter what anybody wants. I just think we need that, and we also need, while we're at it, a little education on how our procedures work as far as discharges and those type things. And that, that process is so foreign and complicated to most people. We might need that every year, a short.
Board attorney's moment. At the next couple of meetings will be fine.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Mike. I mean, they have that class through the TSBA that we all get, but it changes so frequently, and I think that's a great idea. And that way, maybe that'll help the community understand too how that works as well. And I think it's a good idea that we get a little more info up front, and not to put more work on our lead staff, because I know how much they have to do. But since we're the only ones that can grant it, and we have tons of trust in all our directors, I know that, but I understand what you're saying too.
The one thing that's interesting in this process, I go down every year. We have meetings down in Nashville, something called a TASPA conference. The team and what they do there basically is going over all the new laws and everything that's transpiring over the last year. But the one thing that always comes up is the tenure process, and it is not a clear-cut law of how it's set now. And every time it's brought up, the folks down there do not want to address that. So interpretation is very varied on that.
I would just say I think that's a really good suggestion, and it's really important that we all have a clear understanding of the law and process. So I think that's something, Mr. Hull, you and I can work on putting that together.
Great.
Okay. All right. Then we'll go ahead and continue. The next recommendation that I'm bringing you under new business under item 6C, asking for waiver of rules and to adopt a TSBA policy on first reading. And essentially, this policy requires that any staff member who has an arrest would have to notify us immediately of that, and then the director or superintendent notifies the chair, and that is just a policy oversight that some districts in Tennessee have, and we're one that didn't, and so this is a bit of corrective action, asking the board to approve the TSBA policy on first reading.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
The intent of the policy is not to say that you're going to fire someone just because they are let us know they're arrested. It's just that we need to be notified to see if anything we need to do on our end in regards to that.
I'm glad you said that, Mr. Smith, because that was going to be my question. Obviously, I read into it, and I agree. The school district needs to know. But from what I do every day, I do have some concern for as many employees as we have, because sometimes the percentage arrested versus ever convicted of anything is dramatically different. But I trust, our people in the school system to handle that. So I appreciate that clarification. But I do think it's a good idea. I didn't realize we didn't have that, but that's a good policy to have, probably for any employer.
Right.
With you have some hearing issues a little bit. Do you want to just go do it over here? We'll just figure it out, because I can tell you're having trouble here.
Pretty much, when somebody talks in here, if I turn it off, can you not hear?
He's not. Yeah, he's having trouble.
I can hear Matthew.
He's having trouble.
He's laying you out.
I can just tell it's wearing you out because you're getting closer and closer to that.
Okay. Were there any other questions or comments concerning 6C, the policy and the recommendation? Okay.
And I'm going to change.
And item 6D is under CTE, the disposition of materials. These are materials and equipment that are declared surplus. Mr. Flannery couldn't be here this evening, but this is somewhat a routine matter. We would ask the board for permission to declare them surplus and to dispose of them on gov deals. So that there you have a list there for that. If you have any questions, I would try to answer. If not, we could defer till next time till Mr. Flannery could be here.
Dr. Cox, I am on here, so just so you know,
okay. All right. So, there you are.
Yeah. I've made it home, and my wife's going to go see her dad, so we're all good on that. So thank you.
Well, so there he is. So if we have questions, we can ask him.
Yeah. Real quickly, I did share with the board pictures and descriptions of that in your email of all the equipment that needs to be sold off. So also there's some equipment that we need to look at from Sullivan East High School, so we can make room for equipment that needs to move from north to Sullivan East. So I'm asking for the board to approve that we can put the equipment list on gov deals. It's listed under the north equipment reduction list. And if you have any questions, please ask.
What about textbooks?
Okay, sorry. Mr. Flannery, what about books and literature? I know most of this was equipment. What happens what are we doing with our surplus books, textbooks?
Right. So I can only speak on textbooks about textbooks in my department, but we actually did not find a lot of textbooks at North. We've already done a reduction of books at North in most departments. And in my department, I only saw two more sets of textbooks to surplus. So
Right.
we are currently taking those to the warehouse, and we have a third party company that wants to buy these textbooks from us. So and actually come and they pick them up and everything. All we do is transfer them to the warehouse for them to pick them up. And they still actually will come to North and pick them up if we request that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Flannery? Okay. Item 6D is the student fee schedule for 2020, 2021. We are not requesting any increases, so this would be the same fee structure for student fees for next year, and we'll be asking for the board to approve and set that. Any questions? Okay. Item 6F is the board attorney contract. You have of that, and the recommendation is to renew Mr. Hull's contract. Okay. Any questions with that?
It was reviewed by.
Yes, Mr. Cagle, with whom his firm with whom we have a relationship, has reviewed the contract as an outside independent counsel that also works with us on several other issues. He and his firm actually. So, okay. And then we have some financial issues. We have the general public, the GPS amendments, the end of the year resolution, and then the title budgets. And I'm going to let Ms. Deloach comment on that.
Sure. The amendments are our normal end of the year amendments that we have to clean up the line items. There's nothing out of the ordinary there. The budgets that you have for the federal programs, those are 2021 budgets.
I'm not sure what she's talking about right now. Slow down.
Apparently, I have a bad connection. I'm trying to drive down the road to get home. So the last thing that I had was the board approval of the consolidated application form. That this has to be approved before we can get the federal funds.
So you have the documents in your board packet. Does anyone have any questions about any of the items which would begin with 6G and then go through the consolidated application 6J?
I mean, all those title ones are just moving money a little bit here and there. It's nothing being added. It's just.
Mr. Loach, could you hear the question? Mr. Ireson has asked, with the title budgets, it's just not adding money, but to rearrange the expenditures was his question.
2021. That would not be adding any money. That's just recognizing the budgets for those federal programs.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions about those? Okay. And then the final item under new business, I am making a recommendation and requesting that the board would approve an additional assistant director stipend. And you have that information in your packet from me. So in our organizational structure, we currently have one assistant director, and that's the position held by Ms. Buckles. She would continue to do that, and to be in that position. Her assistant director position would be assistant director of student learning, and the second would be assistant director of operations, business, and human resources. As you know, Mr. Smith is retiring at the end of this month, and that would bring those operations under one position. So the budget impact is a $5,000 stipend.
I guess my only question would be, is that enough money? I mean,
Well, that is what the stipend is.
okay.
I mean, that's I would say no.
Well, then I think that maybe it was maybe that helps.
That is a stipend on top of the salary position.
Okay.
For the other responsibilities.
May I make a comment? We all hate for our financial department, I think, to move away from the Board of Ed. Whoops, how our school finances work by adding this position and preventing Mr. Loach from going to the county. I can't think of a better way to open communication with the county. Because we know how capable she is, the integrity and loyalty that she has. And to raise her salary and keep her here, we're almost preventing her from going to the county offices, it seems to me. And this is such an important position, and she is probably the most capable person to work for our county taxpayers and to be a liaison between our system and the county commission. Because this situation has happened, and the HR position, Ingrid is a numbers person, and she's incredibly capable of that. Is HR something that she is trained in? I know Mr. Flannery's going to be doing the athletic applications, but I just question that.
Well, I will say this: we have lots of people that will aid and support her in the assumption of these responsibilities, and I have full confidence that we won't miss a beat.
Allow me to address what you said. A lot of it I agree with, but there's some things I think you are assuming. You're correct. There is no one more capable than Ingrid. But you're assuming that she would go to work for the county. And that's not necessarily the case. The other thing is almost no one that we've hired into HR has been trained in that. We've trained them. The other thing that I would point out, and I think you were here, and I don't know if you heard it or not, but if you were listening when they thought the cameras were off the other day. When the county commission meeting ended, did you hear the comments they made about Ingrid? That don't inspire somebody to want to go to work for them. They thought no one could hear them, but we could. You guys that weren't here, you were. So they made comments questioning her integrity in the last as soon as they thought the mic was off last month. Again, I think you're assuming that she would go to work there. And I don't think she would, whether we send her or not. It's not up to us to send her or allow her. It's up to her. Our decision is just to keep her in another capacity. I have total confidence and trust in Ingrid, as I do most of or all of our people. And I think it was very telling what they said the minute they thought the cameras were off and the mics were off. I think that was, I think if you heard Ingrid as a response to that, I think it had an impact. I don't think there's anybody that has a higher standards or better integrity than Ingrid Deloche. And for those two people to question her, they're in no position to do that. And I'm the one, and I've said it over and over, that you're correct, that the county commission does not understand. They're totally and completely lost. And if you heard the presentation they made last month, I think it was proof positive. You weren't. It was proof positive that they're totally and completely lost. It's not up to Ingrid to go fix them. No, we don't have the right to send her. All we have the right to do is try to keep her. And that goes for the rest of that department. We're not necessarily jumping in bed with them here to try to help them make a bigger mess of what they've already messed up. I had a call today. One of our genius county commissioners took it upon themselves to call one of the principals in the school system and ask him how he'd like to have $2 million extra dollars. We're working on that, he said. Well, their plan is to try to get us to be specific when we take money from undesignated fund balance and tell them exactly what we're going to renovate next year. That's not how it works. They will have no say-so in that matter. Even went so far as to say they had some realtor from Kingsport that was going to help them decide what needed to be renovated. They're not just. I think not only are they they're totally lost. I don't think their motives are honorable or honest either. The same people who took $584,000 that they had already approved made the call now, offering $2 million that they don't have a right to offer. So you're exactly right about most of what you said. I just think maybe you're assuming that these people will go to work over there, and that's just not the case.
Yes, I have. Did you want to go first? The only thing I have is when I came on the board 4 years ago, there was no assistant director of schools. And at that time, Ms. Raflowski asked to create a position, and we did. I think it's very much warranted. Sorry. Since that time, our numbers are continued to fall. We lose 200 to 300 kids a year. So in the 4 years, we probably lost 1,000 kids. We've closed 4 schools. We got plans in another year. There'll be another 3 to 4 schools closing. We've lost a tremendous amount of staff during that same time with the closing of the schools, principals and staff and teachers. I would love to see Ms. Deloche stay with us. I think she did a fantastic job. I think if she moves over to HR job, that's a fantastic move. I think she would do great. She's one of the people that'll move into it. She'll go in through all of the things. I think she'll do a good job with it. It's a huge learning curve, but people have done it. I think she'll do well with that. I also think that I've been by here at night and seen Wendell still here at 5 and 6 o'clock at night trying to get things done. It's a huge job. The HR job's huge by itself. I don't think that we should add another assistant director. I don't think we should add a stipend to it. I don't think that a system that's in a declining enrollment, that's closing schools and getting rid of staff, I'm sorry, not getting rid of staff, not replacing staff, should be adding additional layers of management. I don't think that's the right direction. So in my mind, in that same period of time, we've added one assistant director. We have another assistant director request. We have another person that's there as a consultant, and it's all continuing to be a ballooning management at this level. If that was needed and we're going the other direction, I would be for it. With us declining, I'm not for it. And again, I don't think that it's the right way to go with the situation we're in.
May I speak?
Can I go first?
No. 2012, we had 2 assistant directors. And prior to that, there was 2 assistant directors. One in curriculum, and I think the other one was in more or less overall HR. Those positions were not filled. I think when Ms. Rafalowski took over, she did not assign that position. When you have an organization as big as we are, and you don't need to look at numbers of the students as being the organization, then it's the number of employees. We are the largest employer probably in Sullivan County, if I'm not mistaken. Working in Bristol schools, we had 2 assistant directors over the years. Now, we moved back to where there was 1 assistant director toward the end of my tenure there, where I was the assistant director. But it's an organizational position that allows communication. It allows communication with the public, because if someone calls and has a question, you look to see which assistant director it falls under so that they will know which one to talk with before you move on to the director of schools. With only one, then everything has to be filtered through the one. But if you've got one in curriculum, as we're talking about here with Ms. Buckles, and it's a question that comes in, then it goes straight to her. If we have another one that's a position that's in HR or with business, and then it would go to her before it would go to Dr. Cox. It makes perfect sense for communication purposes, improving communications not only with the county commission, but with the general public, that you have those positions. And $5,000, as Mr. Spivey said a few minutes ago, very minimal. Our supplements in Bristol, I think, was $7,200 a year for the assistant directors. In other systems, Kingsport has 2 assistant directors. They have a smaller number of students than we have. I don't know about the number of employees, but it's a management tool, and the organization of a system is up to the director of schools. It's really not up to the board to do those. Now, the money is, but as far as if Dr. Cox wants 2 assistant directors, that's an organizational type thing. Those positions have been in the budget over the years, and I would disagree with you, Mark, that when you came on board, those positions were there. They just weren't filled. I don't remember what I mean, they were in the budget. They weren't.
Well, her request was to create the position back when she did that. So I don't know if it went away or just not funded, but
they weren't filled is what it was. And she added a supplement. Now, it never been funded as a supplement, if I'm not mistaken. It always been just a salary. And by doing it as a supplement, it allows you to set that up and assign it to anyone that you want in the organizational chart to be the second in command. Whereas if you have a position of an assistant superintendent or assistant director of schools, and that person leaves, you've got to fill that position. By doing it as a supplement, it can be assigned to another supervisor later on if need be, so that the teachers know who to go to and the parents need to know who to go to. I think it's crucial as a general public, when you call in, that you have a question, who do I talk to? And if you look at that organizational chart, it will tell you. If it's curriculum, you'll be talking with Ms. Buckles first. If it's business, you'll be talking with Mr. Loach. And, having worked in HR, I think that the business background that Mr. Loach has is outstanding, that it would allow her to manage and work with that part of it. Teachers are hired mainly by the principals. The way we organize and set up now, when you do the interviews, the principals are the ones who are in charge, because you go to site-based management. That's mainly how schools are set up and operated. So the principals and sometimes even teachers are involved in hiring other teachers when assistant principals. So the HR is not a position of the HR person actually hiring the person. It's the HR person making sure that we are following all the rules and regs as far as salary assignments, legal issues, and things of that nature. But to me, I see it as a crucial management tool for Dr. Cox to be able to have two people that he could go to and say, this is an area of concern. If it's athletics, we know now that's going to go to Mr. Flannery if there's a question about athletics. And I think that's great that you have a person that's a go-to at the central office level. At the high school level, you have Dr. Palmer that you go to, and at the elementary level, you have Dr. McClellan. So it's not layers to slow down communication, but I think it's a layer to improve on communication. That's your turn, Mike.
Well, you said a lot of what I was going to say, but I wanted to point out a couple more things. First of all, Mark, do you know what Ingrid makes?
No clue.
Then how would you know $5,000 would be out of line?
I'm not saying 5,000's out of line. I'm saying the position's out of line.
Okay. Then answer this. On 2 other occasions, you specifically asked this board to add positions to central office.
We're not adding a position. We're rolling 2 positions into one. We're having an HR position that's going to be a tremendous amount of work, but she's going to have that plus.
You just said a minute ago you were opposed to adding a position.
Adding a director position, yes, an assistant director position. I mean, if we had someone come up here and take one of the functions off of some people, I think that would be a good idea.
Well, Ingrid's not going to be doing all the accounting work that she, Ingrid's not going to be doing all the accounting work she was previously doing if this private act passes.
Just died off, I don't know why. I thought I had some juice. 40% of that.
What accounting work will Ingrid be responsible for?
I think what
As the business director for the.
Yeah, but she won't be doing everything she's doing now. If they do the private act and they take the accounting across the street, she won't be doing all the accounting work she's doing.
Right. To be determined.
When a teacher is employed, you have to look at their level of experience, what experience transfers from another school system if they have some. So the business person will be the one to have to make sure that the salary that's sent to the county, because the county is going to be the one paying the employees, but our business person would have to be the one to make sure that the salary that's sent over is correct and that it's transferred correctly. So it's
we also have a very complicated payroll system that, we have to keep account of our retirement and the credit. And I don't think that they're going to be able to do the job. But the things that are left here, Ingrid would do those things. But she would not be responsible for all the duties she is now.
I would like to respond, Mr. Iverson, to provide some clarity to some of your concerns. It's not a net increase in the number of positions. I would just say that. And actually, I would say that we're actually understaffed, given the increased responsibilities. And I'll just give you one example. With the COVID-19 crisis, we've had increased responsibilities. And one of the great things about our lead team is we work together, we all pitch in and help each other out. And that is something that's a real strength of this organization. But having said that, what I really wanted to say is it's very typical in school system organizational structures to have this kind of division of responsibilities. And as Mr. Jones said, I think we're a little bit at a deficit not to have um, a model where there are two key peoples, because the division of responsibilities usually go instruction and then business and operations. And so, as you know, I've been a superintendent for a number of years, and that's very typical of organizational structures that I've worked with. And then I think if you look across our region, we are a little bit out of line not having a structure like that. So it's a very minimal cost to the budget. And just to be clear, the action that the board takes that we're requesting is the approval of the stipend and the creation of that position. And then the personnel decision, of course, I'm telling you up front what my intentions are to do that. So,
yeah, and that was, I was gonna try to just take a step back. And I appreciate the pragmatism of everybody realizing what we're talking about as far as a certain person, but all we're really being asked to do by our director of schools is approve a $5,000 stipend, and we're not in control of employees and organizational structure. That's specifically delineated to our director of schools, who we place trust in. So while I appreciate the pragmatism and I actually agree with a lot of what has been said by many people, I'm just trying to take an objective step back and say it's $5,000 for a position, as Mr. Jones said, that, and I recall what Mark Arson saying as well, but I do also remember that Evelyn said, well, I just never filled this for these years, and that's why I'm asking for the stipend, but that it previously was to assistant directors. So, and I think anybody on this board would be hard pressed to argue that our lead team is overstaffed. I mean, I've been amazed at how much work such a small group of people does. It's pretty astounding. So, my first question at the start of this being brought up wasn't a personnel decision question. It was, is $5,000 enough? I mean, I don't think it is enough. I think for that added responsibility, I wish it could be more. So I have no problem with the request for a $5,000 stipend to the overall budget when we talk about what percentage of our budget that is.
I would just say, too, yesterday I attended a Tennessee School Board Association meeting, and I got a good reminder of what our role is as a board. It is planning, it is promotion of our district, and it is creation of policy. And I would just caution us in not micromanaging and wishing to do things that we're not directed to do.
I know I nodded my head, but I completely agree.
okay. Does anyone have any further questions about the recommendation that I'm making to add a $5,000 stipend for a second assistant director? If not, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the items that we have for this evening for the board's consideration during the business meeting that begins at 6:30.
One other item, Mr. Hughes, you mentioned something about the minutes. If we make a change in the minutes, if there's a correction needs to be made, we have to pull it off the consent agenda before we vote on it or anything like that. If there's a correction need to be made, that's just right. That's just for clarification. That wouldn't. Okay.
With that being said, we will stand adjourned and we will re-adjourn at 6:30. Thank you.